Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. We're on to episode 2 of the Great Guitar Build Off 2022 build. Hope you guys are enjoying it so far. And let's jump right into it. You can see that I've got a more classic guitar shape this year, a more classic body shape with some of my own modifications that I think really help the ergonomics. I've tested them out on some other bodies. I'm happy with how they feel, and I hope you guys will like what I've done with it. Let's get to it. All right, now we are jumping right into the shaping work here, guys. This is the fun part. This is where it really starts to come together, to become unique, all of that. If you watched the last video, you've already seen kind of the outline of the guitar, so to speak, and now I'm putting in my contours. You can see me going in once or twice with the router here to deepen them up and everything. If you follow me on Instagram, you may have already kind of seen this, and if you are a supporter of mine on Patreon, you've definitely seen the body shape already with the contours, and in fact the color and the plates and all of that. So thank you to those of you who follow me and who support me on Patreon. Much appreciated. I hope you guys like the previews there, and thank you to those of you who gave me your feedback on them. So what I'm doing here is going in with my angled bit on the trim router. I'm just using a trim router here. I like using these smaller routers for this type of work. Of course, I use a bigger one to do the outline of the body, but this guy I've got a lot of control over. It's easy to move, it's easy to use one-handed, and I just find that it works better for this type of stuff. So I basically use the biggest angle bit that I've got that can fit into this little router, and that's what I use to make these contours. And you can see how I've been kind of selective about where I'm doing the angle work here. But that's pretty typical for my builds. If you've watched me over the last couple of years do these builds, I like to use that bit for those types of jobs. Now for this one, I've decided, instead of just having the two humbucker cavities like that, because of the way that I'm doing the plating, and you can get a sense of that from the pencil lines on there, I actually want to have that whole thing routed out. I want kind of like the swimming pool cavity type thing, so I can have a nice gap under the plate. And you'll see when I cut the plates, or when I show you guys the cut plates, why I've done that. I think it gives a pretty cool effect in the end. But that's what I'm doing now. I'm just routing that out, kind of deepening it pretty much down to the base of the humbucker area. There is, of course, a hole drilled through there for the electronics, which I won't need anymore. I'll just wire the electronics in kind of off to the side. And I'm going to go ahead and route right down through that hole and go from there. Now, if you happen to be doing a task like this, the tool that I'm using here again is fine, but it's not set up correctly for this job. And by that I mean the plate on the bottom, the plexiglass plate that I have on this that came with it, really isn't adequate. It's actually pretty dangerous. You want one that is wider, one that's going to bridge that entire gap and give you room to move all the way to one side without running out of support. See, when I'm over on one side, half of or more of this thing is unsupported, and so I've really got to focus on where I'm applying pressure, where I'm applying weight when I do this, which is fine. It worked out just fine, and I know how to do that, and I wasn't too worried about it. But don't take that as a tutorial, because it isn't. That's a bad way to do it. What you should do is put a nice big sheet of that Lexan on the bottom, a nice big chunk of plexiglass with it screwed in there and with a hole cut into it for the router bit, and then you can do this safely and easily and move it around all the way. I probably could have figured out a way to do that without having to jig too much together, but this worked. Anyway, moving on, I'm going to clean that up with one of my chisels. These are the Hosco chisels that I have from Solo Music Gear. I have quite a few chisels, a few sets of them in fact, but these ones are my favorite that I own. I mean, I'm no Ben Crow, I don't have an entire wall of them, but I've got quite a few, and these ones are the hollow back ones. They are very easy to keep sharp, and they do a great job. So if you're looking for those, as always, I've got a Solo Music Gear link in the description. It's an affiliate link, and this is, I've gotten a lot of good stuff from them, a lot of good stuff. But I gotta say, those chisels are probably among my favorites. Anyway, now I'm moving on to the big router again, and I've got a relatively large roundover bit, not my biggest one. I've got a massive one from Solo Music Gear that I use for like necks and stuff and some shaping work, but here I'm using a smaller one because I'm planning on doing some other contour work on this thing, and I don't want to have to deal with kind of meshing that contour work with huge roundovers. The huge roundovers just aren't what I'm going for on this one. So I do my basic roundover work on the front and back. This is along the lines of what you can expect to see on a typical, Fender guitar, that kind of thing. And I'm generally doing this in 2 passes, so you can see me kind of lower that down, take a pass, and then raise it up and take a pass. And that's kind of the gist of how I'm handling the edges on this until I get to my actual carving work. And you'll see how I do that. If you've been following me for a while, you have a general sense at least of how I start it. Although after the initial carve, my methodology has changed a little bit, and so have the tools that I used, mostly because I want to be able to do them in my garage and I don't have to run a big compressor with what I've got now. I've got some electrical tools instead of pneumatics. I run pneumatics at the shop, and I can run them in my garage, but my compressor is very loud, and my garage is a pretty confined space, so I try to avoid that when I can. Anyway, so we're finishing up our roundover work here, and then we're going to be able to move right along to the carving, and you'll see that's where, again, all the contour work is cool. It really starts to look and feel like a guitar, but the carving work, that's where it really starts to feel like my guitar. Really get to individualize it. So I'm starting off with a really deep forearm carve here. You can see I've marked a line for how deep I want to go. And in my previous Great Guitar Build-Off builds, I've actually cut a whole section out here, but this time I'm just doing a really deep carve instead. I did a test of one of these on a different guitar body that I had kicking around to make sure that from an ergonomic perspective it had kind of the same impact, that it would still be extremely comfortable and easy playable, that kind of thing. And I was really pleased with the results. So I'm going to have kind of 2 options going forward when I do builds like this. I'll either do my arm cutout like I have on the other ones, or I will do this. They both feel really good. I don't like having nothing there. I don't like kind of just a flat one. But both of these options seem to work well. So you can see, again, I'm going really deep there. I was showing you the kind of normal speed carving a moment ago. Now we're sped up to 300% because you don't need to see me do this whole thing in real time, so to speak, but you can see just how far in I'm carving this thing. I just find that makes it more comfortable. It's going to be a nice little armrest. It's in the appropriate place, at least for how I play, and the other people who have played the other guitars that I've done, well, they've seemed pretty happy with the comfort level. So next I'm using a kind of a fixed sander here, a fixed orbital. What it actually is a variable speed polisher. This is my Porter and Cable polisher, and I have a different hook and loop pad that I put on it for polishing and also for sanding when I want. So this is going to do a faster job of sanding than, a random orbital sander, a palm sander would. I'll go in with that afterward to smooth it out the rest of the way, but this is a nice happy medium between that grinder work and the sander, and you can get pretty smooth with this. I guess now would be the time to mention, if you guys are looking for this, if you're looking for the new hook and loop attachment, if you're looking for the carving wheel that I was using before, that's a saber-tooth carving wheel, all of that stuff is available in the link in the description. That's the Amazon link. It takes you to my lists, and I've got a variety of lists. This thing will actually be in the polishing one because it's a polisher, but there's abrasives and stuff in there too. So check that out if you're interested in any of that stuff. That is also an affiliate link. If you order anything through there, it helps me out. I would appreciate it if you're looking for any of this. So this thing, it gets the job done pretty quick, and you could do the carving work with this instead of going in there with the grinder, but that would be much slower. The grinder is the fastest way that I've found. There are other options, of course. There are belt sanders. You can do it by hand. You can do it with a Shinto rasp if you're going to do it by hand. That's a good option. Not good for a carve that has curves like that so much as it is, good for doing a straight carve. But it can get at least a good portion of the work done really quickly, as can chisels if you've got really sharp chisels and you know what you're doing. I find that the grinding wheel like this actually gives me a little bit more control than having to worry about slicing through the grain, and it's obviously way faster than any other kind of handheld abrasive, including the Shinto rasp. Again, what you were seeing there a moment ago, that was all real time. Now I've moved to 300% speed, and I'm doing a pretty aggressive carve here too. In fact, this isn't the only one that I'm going to do. You'll see what I do kind of at the heel after. Watching this come together as I go through it, kind of as I do my carving work,
I make a few decisions on the fly, but generally speaking, I had a plan for how I wanted to approach this. What I really need here is a better bench for this. Like, this is an upgrade with the bench dog system. It's an upgrade from how I was doing it before, but it leaves a lot to be desired still. So one of these days I will get around to making the top for my workbench and putting in the bench dog system and having all of this stuff work properly, and installing my vise, which I've already bought, one of these days. But we're not there yet. So for now, this system works out. This table was very cheap. It's foldable, all that good stuff, and a few bench dog attachments and a little bit of extra drilling work have made it so that it's actually pretty functional for most of the hold down work that I need. So again, here we're going in with the fixed orbital sander, aka the polisher, and I'm using it at a fairly high speed, faster than I would probably for polishing at this point. I end up slowing it down a little bit later, but for now I'm using a coarser sandpaper, and I'm just kind of trying to rip some wood off there. I'm easing all of the edges that I leave with the grinder, so I focused on getting the carve in there with the grinder, but now to round that over and kind of create the joint, the transition between that and the body, that's all done with the sandpaper, and taking out all the grinder marks, because that thing, it wouldn't even be a very coarse sandpaper. It would be much rougher than that. It's actually like a spiky little wheel, and it rips away wood really quick. It's got some holes in it, which is cool because you can actually see what you're doing through it. As it ramps up and gets spinning real quick like it does on a grinder, you can see right through it, which is super cool. Very innovative, kind of like a propeller off an airplane, but it does leave some marks. So you got to be careful. You got to leave yourself a little bit of extra room to carve afterward, and you got to go in with the sandpaper and get rid of that. At this point, I start kind of playing with my creativity, so to speak, looking at this area, feeling it with my hands, trying to determine whether I want to remove more material. You can see me switch to a 60 grit paper there because I want to really try and remove some material. I'm going a little coarser, and then as I feel my way around this and see how it looks, I decide, no, I want to go even deeper with this heel carve. So after playing around with the sandpaper for a bit, I quit messing around, so to speak, and I switch back to the grinder wheel, and then I'll come back in with the sandpaper after. So here I am really taking some meat off of here. There's plenty to hold the neck in place, plenty to make it good and strong, but also plenty to get in the way when you're holding it. And so you really don't need that much wood back there, particularly with this 4-bolt joint that I'm doing. This is very robust. There's no need for that. I'm going to go ahead and take a whole bunch of that off and then go in with the sander again right now and ease that transition, smooth it all out, and make it good and comfortable. I think that's one of the very most important things with a guitar is how comfortable is it? How does it feel to play? Because that's where a lot of tone comes from. I'm not going to get into the argument about tone woods on here because there's no point, but a lot of what matters with your wood and with the shape of your guitar and that kind of thing is all about how it feels. How it looks matters too for you, but how it feels is very important for how you end up playing it. So easing these transitions, making sure that the heel is comfortable, getting some comfortable carves in there, all of that stuff, at least as far as I'm concerned, is very important. So at this point, what I'm going to do is work my way through a couple of finer grits of sandpaper, really get this all smoothed out, and then move it over from the clamping system on the table here to my sanding mat, which is basically a really soft floor mat. That's going to hold this in place and catch the sawdust rather, and basically avoid making any more marks on it as I go in with my random orbital sander and make sure that this is all really nice and smooth and pretty much ready for finishing. I still end up hand sanding it before I actually get started on the finishing process, and you'll see how I do my grain filling and everything like that, but that's all going to be in the next video. So in this one, I'm going to finish up the machine sanding, and that's going to be it. Stay tuned. Next week, we are moving on to the grain filling and finishing work. We've got 2 videos left. We're going to finish up this series pretty quick. Like I said last time, it'll need to be done by December 10th. Those are the rules. I expect that I'll have this posted on my last one, posted on the 9th. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and remember to subscribe so that you can see how the rest of this series goes and my upcoming projects. I'm going to leave you here and transition into some music so you can see the rest of this, and I will see you next time. Have a good one.